I've been trying to keep track of gymnastics first few meets, but obviously now having head coach Kristin White in the studio. Glad he could join us.
Yeah, super excited to be here with the both of you.
So, Coach, you've your squad has already had a couple of competitions in the books, if you will, but local folks haven't been able to really see you outside of the blue-white scrimmage that you did. So this coming Friday is the first chance to see your team in person. How do you feel like things have gone so far to this point where you can finally show the team in season to the fans?
Yeah, I'm super excited for our fans to come and watch our athletes. This will be our fourth competition for this year. We were on the road the first 3 weekends, and unfortunately our first 2 showings weren't really what this team is capable of. We started a little bit slow. We had a couple athletes that came out just prior to the start of season. So I think our confidence was down just a little bit, and we had a hard time overcoming that adversity. But last Friday we were on the road at Southern Utah, and we ended up beating them for the first time at their place in 5 years. So I think we started to see that confidence come back, and we were able to put some lineups together that we were feeling really comfortable with. And I think our fans going to really enjoy the experience on Friday.
So, yes, obviously those first couple meets posted 193 is obviously on the lower end. You get the 195. Obviously, you feel like that's a lot closer to the potential of this team. Like last year, they were averaging about 195, peaking at 196. You feel like that's about where this team can be, as like a lot of what you guys were doing last year?
Yeah, I think starting kind of where we were at last year, our goal is definitely to be in the mid 196s, trying to push for 197, and this team is definitely capable of it. We're still a little young from a competition experience standpoint, but I think the more competitions we get under our belt, the more they start to feel comfortable and settle into those lineups. I think we're going to really see a jump for this team. Yeah,
I guess you may have just answered this question, but I guess what are those keys to, a couple years ago, the team, it was before you got here, but, they were in that mid-196. I think they might have gotten to 197 or come really close to it. Like, what are the keys for you guys to eventually, push back into that where, Utah State was, had that kind of team, a couple years ago?
Yeah, so I think for us, coming in, obviously we lost a lot of depth, right? So we've been rebuilding this program the last year and a half. But for our athletes, it's really just trusting the process, understanding that little things are going to happen here and there, but the process for them is as individuals, and if they just go out and focus on their performance, then they're going to be able to achieve their personal best for the team. So it's really just building the confidence in the lineup, getting more experience, putting those lineups out there, and our athletes just kind of growing in that role.
So you've the schedule to date, as we said, you've been away. You've gone on a lot of road excursions. You had a game back east. A match, I keep calling them games, but a match, a meet back east with some interesting competition. You had one at the Maverick Center, which is always kind of exciting to have different squads from around the state of Utah compete in one place. And then just recently you were down in Cedar City to take on Southern Utah. So how have things kind of progressed? Are any surprises so far, what you've seen out of your athletes as this kind of season has kind of gone on so far?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest surprise is just seeing them overcome those first 2 competitions and put out a great performance on Friday night. Our sport is such a mental sport, and sometimes when you have those meets where things don't go as you expected, it's kind of hard to crawl yourself out of that hole that you put yourself in. And I think our athletes did a tremendous job just rebuilding and getting their foot back to where it needed to be. So I'm just really proud of them. We had some athletes, 3 in particular, that stepped into lineup spots last Friday, and again, I think just boosted the confidence and kind of laid the new foundation for season going into this first home match.
So kind of walk us through some of these key players you've got. 'Cause there's some names that I recognize. Brianna Brooks was a player we had on our show, I know, last year, and she's obviously been doing all around for you guys. But you mentioned some of the team being young. Just walk us through some of these key players that you've got, on this team, young and some of the veteran leaders you've got.
Yeah, so obviously Brianna Brooks is a strong all-arounder for us. She's been training in the all-around and has just done a phenomenal job, and she is an amazing leader for our team. So we've been very blessed to continue to have her as part of our program. And then we also have our 2 transfers, Olivia Ostendorf and Jenna Eagles, who transferred last year from 2 different programs that were incredible for us last year and have again been exceeding expectations this season and have been strong leaders. We also have a transfer, Juliette Boyer, who is a 5th-year senior from Arizona State, which is kind of unique. Rachel and I had the opportunity to coach her when we were both assistants at Arizona State, so to have her has been pretty exciting. She's a great vaulter, really strong on bars, so having her in the lineups has been awesome. And then we have 7 freshmen, and they're starting to kind of come into their own, and a lot of them have been great contributors for our program, and we're starting to see them break into those lineups and be very successful.
Oh, sorry, I was no, because I wanted to ask a question after you were done.
Nope, you're good.
But I want to ask about those freshmen and that transition, because obviously, gymnastics getting recruited with college is different because they're not really like high school teams or like, high school age in their programs and whatnot. But like, what's that transition like for freshmen going into a college, rotation essentially?
Yeah, so it's kind of unique. There's either 2 types of club teams. There's the club team where the athlete is the best on the team and they're really the only one at that level. And then there's club teams where there's a lot of, successful athletes and they have a pretty large team. So we see quite a bit of a mix between the freshman class. We have some that came from a really big club that understand that team aspect and what that means to be a part of a team. And then we have a lot that have kind of just been on their own their entire career. So the adjustment can be difficult sometimes. Yes, it is an individual sport, but it is also a team sport. So sometimes it's a little challenging for them to understand, their new role of what their routine needs to look like in order to be in a lineup. And I think early on, they didn't quite understand what it would take to break into a lineup spot. And I think now that season started rolling, they're starting to figure it out. They know what they need to do to be in that spot. And I really think we're starting to see them kind of come around and start figuring it out.
Kristin White, head coach of the Utah State gymnastics team. They've got their first home event coming up on Friday, 7 o'clock in the Spectrum. And, Coach, this is you kind of leading into my next question here. When putting a roster together of gymnasts, there are a lot of different events that happen in any particular meet. So what's that process like in developing specialists for certain routines versus somebody who's talented enough to go and perform in a variety of different events that will go on in the course of an entire match?
Yeah, from a recruiting standpoint, it gets a little challenging sometimes because you don't want to recruit just a specialist onto your team, because then you might run into the issue if you have sicknesses or illnesses that you run into depth problems, right? We have to put our best 6 up on each event. So when we look at those things, we look at athletes that can at least practice on all the events, have the potential to compete every event, while also recognizing that a lot of them do have their specialties. So while you may only see an athlete compete bars, they also do still train every event to try to keep the depth going for our program. So, right now we only have one all-arounder in Brianna Brooks, and to be honest, she's probably not even going to do floor this weekend. She didn't do floor last weekend at Southern Utah, just because our depth has been looking pretty good on those events. So we've been able to kind of rest her and, have great success on the other 3. So it's kind of a puzzle piece trying to figure out, where your holes are when your seniors graduate and where you need to fill. But we really try to look at every event and then also trying to pick out what those specialties look like for each of them.
Yeah, so players may have like a specialty in one. Do you maybe have them like, I guess usually all-rounders can be fairly rare, but usually like maybe if they practice all of it, maybe you'd consider only for like 1 or 2, where it's like they're doing this one, maybe this other event, and then pretty rarely are athletes going to be able to do 3 or 4.
Yeah, so we have a lot of athletes like that. Sophomore Avery Bibby is one of our best bar workers on our team, and you'll see her in the leadoff spot on Friday night. She trains every event, but she may not necessarily compete every event while she's here at Utah State, but she's able to put routines together. So we know if we ever needed her to do a routine that she's ready and able to step into that role.
And so I want to ask, we were talking a little bit before the show about the different events, strengths and weaknesses in each event. You talked about how the ones you thought you were maybe going to make, I think you said it was vault and floor. Like you thought there was going to be some struggle there with, you've had problems with depth. But those seem to be your better ones, whereas, bars and beam, those ones where, and I'm not saying they're bad, but like vault and floor have kind of surprised you a little bit as far as being better than you expect them to be.
Yeah, for sure. Last year we had no depth on vault and floor, and so we worked really hard to increase that depth. But I did think at the beginning of the season those were going to be two events that maybe we would struggle with a little bit more than what we're seeing. So it's really encouraging to see that we're in a much better spot on those two events. Bars and beam have been a little bit hit or miss, so I'm hoping, on Friday we'll be able to put better performances together there so that all around, all four events are starting to come together where we would like to see them.
So it's Air Force who's coming to town, and they are, this is a familiar squad that have been part of the conference in the past. And they're still part of a conference, but the conference is different now. So what's that transition been like, moving from Mountain Rim to now the Mountain West? The Mountain West Conference, which sponsors a lot of sports at Utah State, now also have gymnastics under their umbrella. What's that transition been like?
It's been absolutely incredible. To fall under the Mountain West umbrella is really exciting for all four programs. The Mountain Rim was great for us in the past, but it never really provided that championship feel. So now we're in the planning process of the championships. They'll be hosted here in Logan on March 23rd, and we're really excited about it. All four teams, Boise State, Air Force, San Jose State, and Utah State, are incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be a part of the Mountain West, and I think our fans are actually going to understand it now. When you're winning a championship for the Mountain West, it means something to our fans. And so our student athletes are excited. We're just really grateful, honestly, that they decided to take on gymnastics and let us be a part of it.
Just as a follow-up to that, what's the difference? This week you're going to be just you and Air Force. But earlier like at the Maverick Center, there were 4 schools competing in one venue. What's that like from a team management kind of aspect of it's one school versus another versus this is an event where there's lots of athletes competing all over the place in the venue? How is that different, or is it really that big of a difference?
To be honest with you, it's not a huge difference. Some of it's more just timing. You can have a quad meet where you do a routine after routine after routine, so there's not a lot of standing. The Maverick Center was unique because we started this new double duel format that you'll see in the postseason, especially for the national championship. And so there's a little bit more waiting, and we actually are thinking about adopting that for our Mountain West Championship. So the quad meet that we'll have at the end of February, we're going to practice that so that we're prepared going into the championship. But honestly, the meets are the same whether it's one team competing against you or you have 3 other teams. The goal, it always remains the same: to do your best gymnastics, to trust the process, and a lot of it is just more of a timing thing. And so we train that in practice, just making sure that we're prepared for whatever meet we have ahead.
So I want to ask, go back to the Mountain West. Obviously, you mentioned from I don't know if prestige is the right word, but being in the Mountain West opposed to the Mountain Rim gymnastics, you don't have to remind fans it's Mountain Rim instead of Mountain West. But I want to ask about a practical standpoint. Is anything changed too much aside from, it's mostly the same teams? I think you swap out SUU for Air Force essentially. Is that kind of the main thing, or are there other practical differences this year being in the Mountain West as opposed to different conference?
A lot of it just kind of runs the same. We still have the same weekly awards that we had from our other conference. We still try to see each other home and away every year. This year's a little bit unique just because we're just getting the Mountain West going, so we weren't required to do home and away with every program. But leading into next year, we will do home and away with all the programs. We'll have a regular season champion, and then we'll also have our championship champion. So those will be a little bit more unique because when we were in the Mountain Rim, we did not have a regular season champion. So a lot of it's relatively the same. It just falls under the Mountain West, which there's a lot more support from the Mountain West from an organizational standpoint and from a championship experience. So we're really looking forward to it.
So how did all that come about as far as making the Mountain West as opposed, the Mountain West deciding to sponsor gymnastics?
I think a lot of it just started with conference realignment in general, right? So we had BYU a part of the Mountain Rim, and they were leaving to join the Big 12 this year. So we knew at the end of season last year there were only going to be 3 teams remaining: Utah State, Boise State, and Southern Utah. And so a lot of it just came from our administrators getting together with the other 2 Mountain West schools and just starting conversation with our presidents and then going to the conference office. We had a new commissioner join the Mountain West, Gloria Navarez, and she was also a former administrator at the University of Oklahoma when I was a student athlete there. And so I think she really values gymnastics. She knows that our sport can bring a lot to our fans. And so she was on board with figuring out a way to make it happen. And honestly, it was a lot of just continued talks with them. And then they just decided that they would sponsor gymnastics. So we've been really, really, really excited about it.
From your perspective, you've been, obviously you were players, you just mentioned, but you've been an assistant coach at a couple of notable programs, and learning to be a head coach. What's that process been like for you as you went through all last season and now you're coming into another one? What are some of the biggest things that you've learned personally about being a head coach of a gymnastics program at the collegiate level? I think the biggest thing is just having all the responsibility come down on your shoulders, right? When you're an assistant, you know that you're ready to step into that role, but quite honestly, you don't know what that role feels like until you're the person sitting down in the seat. So I think a lot of it was just, trusting all the decisions that I make and putting our student athletes first. That has always been my number one goal, and it will always remain my number one goal. And so I've strived really hard to have great relationships with our student athletes. And I ask a lot of questions because I'm not going to know every answer, right? I'm a new, young head coach, and I want to do things the right way. So I think the one thing about being a head coach here at Utah State is just the support that I've received from our administration. Our administrators have been amazing at, helping guide me through the new transition of, what Utah State had and then what I had kind of come on to. And they've just been awesome and give us tons of support, and they come to practice and they support our student athletes. And we have an amazing athletic director that has really just bought into the vision that we have for our program, and I've been really blessed for that.
So it's like coaching at Utah State specifically as far as recruiting and also looking at local athletes. I'm kind of interested there because there's some sports that have it really easy recruiting local, like soccer. There's a hotbed of women's soccer players, and even girls basketball and some others. There's some local athletes. Are there any local athletes around around Logan? Are there gymnastics clubs that you're able to recruit from, or do you end up having to kind of look outside of the state of Utah?
I think, from the state of Utah, we've got some amazing clubs that are here, so we're able to find some athletes. And currently we have 3 athletes on our team that are from Utah. We also will have another one that will be joining us next season. Actually, we have 2 joining us next season. And so Salt Lake City is also a hotbed for gymnastics. There's some incredible clubs down there. But quite honestly, from a gymnastics standpoint, we really look everywhere, just because we don't really have high school level gymnastics. It's all club-based. So it makes us kind of recruit nationally and sometimes internationally. We have a freshman on our team this year from Canada. She was the Canadian national champion last year. And so we're just blessed that we can kind of recruit from anywhere. And usually when people come to Utah and they visit Utah State, they fall in love with it because, it's absolutely beautiful when you look out your window and see the mountains.
Do you think it makes it easier to have the club system? Because obviously, basketball, football, it's a high school system. I know obviously you haven't recruited high school football and basketball, but do you think it's easier with the club system?
I honestly don't know. I've never really thought of that because club is all that I've ever known. So I don't know what it would be like to have tons of high school age athletes to recruit from. When you think of high school, just in Cache Valley alone, there's 3-4 high schools, right?
Yeah, it's
5 high schools.
5 high schools. So, that's a lot of athletes just to choose from in the valley. And so typically you don't find that many athletes even from one gymnastics club. So I think it could be maybe a little bit more challenging just because you have a lot more athletes that you could look at. But also the club level could be challenging just because you have to go a little bit further. So you have to do more research and find those athletes that go to those clubs. So I've never really thought of it because I've never had to be in that position. But it's pretty unique for our sport.
Yeah.
I shouldn't exclude our friends in Franklin County. That'd be 7 high schools in Cache Valley.
Yeah, you include Bear River and
Bear River.
8, so
yeah.
it's there's a lot around here.
There's a lot. But speaking of the athletes, the football is probably the arguably the most punishing sport on someone's body. But I would think that gymnastics has got to be a close second with what they go through their practices and what they do in their routines. What's it like just to keep them healthy and be able to compete?
It's funny you say that. in gymnastics, when you grow up at the club level, I think every gymnast has a sweatshirt that says, if gymnastics was easy, it would be called football, which is kind of funny. I think even I had one when I was a little bit of a little girl, but it's hard, right? Like, they've been doing this sport since they were some 18 months old, and so the wear and tear that their body takes throughout their time of even just like club level gymnastics is a lot. So when they come to school, we have to be very smart in how we train them. And I think that's the blessing of college gymnastics, is all the resources you have around you, from athletic training to mental health to sports psychology to a coaching staff that, you know, actually sits down and doesn't think about just what you're doing in the gym. They think about everything that you're doing outside of the gym as well, you know, making sure that they're recovering properly, and, you know, that they have good priorities and getting their schoolwork done ahead of time and all of those things. So it is challenging. Most of the time our athletes are pretty beat up by the time they get here their freshman year. So there is a little bit of an adjustment on figuring out, you know, is this event really smart for them to train? Are they going to compete this event? If they're not ever going to compete it and it's mentally and physically too much for them to handle and they can't do the other events, then we kind of need to adjust our plan. And so that's usually what we do. Most of the time our athletes are blessed to do all of the events, but we do have cases where we will pull an event or two just because their body can't take it anymore. I think the thing about club, though, now is, you know, old gymnastics was, you know, push the kid as hard as you can really, really young. And I think that you're starting to see gymnastics kind of transition away from that. And so our athletes are starting to peak at a much later age, which is amazing for us. You know, 10, 15 years ago, a gymnast peak is around 14 to 16 years old. And at that point, they're not even thinking about college, right? But now you're starting to see that peak happen even later. I think a lot of that has been due to club changing a little bit, but also just like our recruiting rules have changed, and you can't get recruited until you're a junior in high school now. Whereas a few years ago, you know, you could call a 6th or 7th grader and talk to them about what they're looking for, and they don't know, right? So I think our sport has done a really good job of transitioning and trying to peak them a lot later, which has made them a lot healthier in college for sure.
Is that just a little bit older in the Olympics as well? Though there's still some younger athletes for that particular sport, but it seems like the premier athletes seem to be a little bit older than they were 10, 20 years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head, but just in this last Olympics, I think the youngest might have been 17, 18, and, you know, even the last quad, they were still younger, and even quads before that, they were just barely 16, the entire team. So you're starting to see them, you know, peak a lot later, and they're starting to get a lot smarter with their training, which has helped. I mean, Simone Biles is, you know, going for her 3rd Olympic Games, and, you know, she's not 16 years old anymore, so it's pretty phenomenal to be able to see what she can do from a competitive standpoint as, you know, she's starting to get older, and she's married now, and it's pretty awesome to see her out on the competition floor.
So is that being smarter, just trying to, like, train her, or, like, just putting less wear and tears for, like, less competitions, less practice? Because that's the thing you see in a lot of high school and high school level sports, is they're playing year-round or competing year-round. Is that kind of where gymnastics is getting better, where they're not just constantly competing and, you know, developing that wear and tear to where they're beat up by the time they're 16 years old?
Yeah, I mean, our sport, we never really have, like, a really long season, right? Like, our season's pretty short, but it's training year-round. You know, gymnastics is not the sport where you can take a week, 2, 3 weeks off and just bounce right back. Like, it's usually however much time you take off, it takes you that long or double to get back to where you were before. And so I think a lot of it is just coaches being smart, realizing you don't have to train 30, 40 hours a week at the club level to be successful. You know, if you get in and you have a great training plan, you can get things done a lot quicker. So I think coaches are starting to be more efficient. And I just think the nature of sports medicine has grown so much. There's so many, you know, opportunities for athletes to take care of themselves compared to what we had 15 years ago. So I think a lot of that is just being smart, working with, you know, your PTs or athletic trainers, and, you know, implementing good plans into your training plan.
Coach, one more time, the first home meet of the season coming up on Friday. Give us the details.
Yeah, so we're really excited. First home meet. You know, we would love to have 4,000 plus fans in the stands. Last year we had about 3,500 for 2 of our competitions, so we're really looking forward to the fans coming out. Hopefully there's no snow. Sometimes we end up having snowstorms on our home meets, which is kind of unfortunate, but The first 400 kids will receive a tiara or cape because it's our princess and superhero night, so we're really excited about that. We also have a special ticket deal for our real-life superheroes, our military, first responders, and teachers. They can get online and purchase a ticket for $6. We'll have free food for all USU students. So we've got some really great promotions going on.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then our team just excited to be home. You know, they love nothing more than competing in the Spectrum and having Spectrum magic and competing in front of our fans and hearing the chants and doing the fight song before the last rotation going into floor. So we're really looking forward to a great performance, building off our last performance at Southern Utah. And really, they just want to light the A blue. So I think that's our biggest focus.
Yeah. And so it's the first of 4 home meets, not including the Mountain West Championships will be held here.
Correct.
So we have several chances, but this will be the first one.
This will be the first one. We'll have an additional home meet next Friday, which will be our Spectrum Magic meet, which we're really excited about. That will be with Southern Utah, so we'll get to see them again.
Some cool classic unis that you pull out for that.
It is. It is. You know, the uniform is very unique, but it's also awesome because it matches, you know, the inside of the Spectrum. So our athletes love wearing that one. And then we'll be on the road at Oklahoma, so we'll get to go see the national championship team, which will be exciting. And then we're home again the next 2 following weekends. Our third home meet is going to be our My Cause meet, which I encourage a lot of our fans to come out and experience that meet. A lot of times you see like breast cancer awareness meets or mental health meets, and we've decided to do just a general My Cause. So all of our athletes and staff members have picked a special cause that's important to them, and they'll wear a ribbon or t-shirt or something, you know, on their uniform that'll designate what their special cause is, and you'll get to see a lot of videos played during the meet. There'll be a lot of resources for people that if something really touches their heart and they want to learn more about, they'll have the information to do that. And then our final home meet before the championship will be alumni and senior night, which will be a quad meet. So we got a great lineup this year, really excited about it. And we'd love for all the fans to come out and support the team, and then also come out and support the Aggies in the first ever Mountain West Championship.
Very cool. Well, Coach White, thank you so much for coming down and spending some time with us. Best of luck on Friday and for the season as it's still underway. Already a couple matches under your belts, but certainly a lot more to come, and a lot of them at home too. So a lot of opportunities for Aggie fans to check out USU Gymnastics.